hands. The gentleman in the back. If someone will pass this back, raise your hand.
Thank you. This is a question that I have about the appropriateness of pursuing causes. And let me explain a little bit, because this is actually a question that I've had on my mind for a while, but it came to kind of a head when I talked to my daughter just a little while ago. And part of her frustration with me at this point in my life is that I'm focusing on being loving, trying to be the presence of love as well as I can, trying to find my peace. And this is quite different than the earlier part of my life, where I was very focused on causes. And when she was being raised, she was kind of raised into this idea that the world needs help and we need to do something effective about it. And being peaceful, or being in your peace, or granting beingness, or being loving, doesn't seem to be, to her and to many people, and even to myself sometime, an effective answer to the problems of the world, quote unquote. You see things like more and more kids are getting drugged or getting Ritalin in grade schools. You know, it wasn't that way 20 years ago, but now kids are being handed Ritalin like candy. The problem with the women and the Talibans in Afghanistan, you know, all of these causes that seem very worthy, but they need to, it seems like somebody needs to be there and really pushing and doing something and standing up and arguing or fighting. And I guess the question is what is the appropriateness or the inappropriateness of being in one's peace, or being apparently not pushing to correct the wrongs that are apparent in society? And is it appropriate simply to be floating on one's back, you know, as you had expressed yesterday? Is it appropriate to push your shoulder on the wheel of helping these causes to try to help to right the wrongs? Or is really just what seems apparent passivity, and letting all of these
Apparent
passivity, being passive, rather than really doing something about the evils, quote unquote, of the world? And you know, I think I know the answers, but I don't. I'm still a bit conflicted, because sometimes I feel like I'm just, as my daughter feels sometimes, I'm just not doing anything. You know, I'm not doing anything actively to correct what is apparent that is wrong in the world. And there's so many of these good causes that one can concentrate on. And sometimes it seems even to myself that maybe just there's a certain degree of selfishness in just being in one's peace, I guess, and just trying to come from a loving place while all of this stuff goes on around me that I'm not, quote unquote, doing something about.
Let me ask you this. Does it appear to you that Paul is being passive?
No, he's not. I mean, Paul is being very active in terms of the fact that he is doing something very important and significant for all of us here, which means that he is allowing you to speak to us, which is hugely important for me, and I'm sure for everybody here.
My point is that in order for him to do this, he must be in his peace. So being in one's peace does not mean one is floating on his back or doing nothing. I told Michael that it was appropriate for him to float on his back because at this moment, that's the point of unfoldment he is at. But it should not be inferred that all of you are to float on your back. Not all of you need to let certain things soak in, sink in, or be in an attitude that is receptive to influx of insight and clarity. If you're in your peace, and if you're being present with your world, you are going to be active, but what you do and how you do it will arrive out of an unconflicted place, and as a result, the results will not be conflicted. What you do will be apparently more effective. You know, you must say no to the ego. You must say no to hate. You must refuse to participate in codependent relationships. You must say no when it comes to the opportunity to override your integrity. And indeed, you must say yes to what does represent and help manifest what does represent harmony and help in the manifestation of it. Passivity usually means doing nothing. But passivity is, in actuality, the foundation for activity that expresses the Father's will. Activity that expresses and embodies truth. Activity that heals. Activity that harmonizes. I said yesterday that this one here needed to become more social, more involved. It's isolation and independence, which is the ego's domain. And it is being involved with your brother or your sister or your neighbor or your neighboring country, etc., that breaks the isolation by the establishment of communication that isn't arising out of a conflicted inner state, and the breaking of the isolation and the subsequent establishment of brotherhood by means of communication is what lays the groundwork for an increased experience of safety, which of course reduces the apparent call for defense. And none of this will happen if everyone simply curls up in their nice little metaphysical ball, full of wonderful, glorious, pacifying spiritual truths. You know, the use of spirituality to insulate yourself is in some ways a much more malicious activity of the ego than the entertainment of thoughts of hate and guilt and fear. I spoke at the last gathering about the ego being like a soap bubble, a flimsy, almost invisible line of separation between the air inside the bubble and the air outside the bubble. And all of you identify yourself as the volume of air inside the bubble, while all the rest of the infinity of you is going on the outside. And you increase the substantiality of the bubble by constantly adding soap, making it more durable. And the soap can be, as I said, hate, fear, self-protection, defense, or it can be wonderful, marvelous, pacifying, sweet spiritual truths. If the truth isn't causing you to reach out to your fellow man and break the isolation, then it's not truth, it's an excuse for remaining isolated and independent, except that now it seems to be justified by what God would back up. Spiritual truths, you see. Now, causes, as you're referring to them, usually imply polarized opposites, one overcoming another. But if your choice for peace brings you to a place where you're not charged, where polarization is incapable of being experienced, then your engagement in saying no, your engagement in a cause per se, will be unpolarized. The basis of your action will be unpolarized. And it will be capable of seeing both sides of the problem and seeing where the elements are, where the points are, where solution can creep in and transform the situation so that you can give your support to that. In other words, your activity will be one of acting in support of the answer. It won't be a matter of overcoming one or the other of the polarized points of the problem, whether it's countries or individuals or points of view. You can't wake up alone. You're suffering from being alone. Being alone is the problem that you're trying to be released from by awakening. So extension has to occur. Embrace has to occur. Saying yes to that which affirms wholesomeness and integrity must occur, and saying no to that which undermines it must be said. But if you're saying it from that place of balance in you, your saying no or yes will not be charged. It will be grounded and solid, and it will be recognizable for the most part to everyone for what it is, and it will not raise defense. It will not raise the degree of defense that a fighting challenge will. Those who do not want to change yet will raise their defense against your yes or no. But if you are in your balance, even their defense against what you're suggesting will be able to be seen in a larger perspective, and you will know how to dance with it without engaging with it in a defensive manner, which would be likely to elicit more defense. From your peace, you will engage in a cause without self-righteousness. And without self-righteousness, again, you are less likely to arouse defense in others, those you are saying no or yes to in opposition to what their point of view is. So don't think that being in your peace means you will be inactive. Do not believe that being in your peace means you will not be able to be a force for good in the world. Being in your peace is the first step in being able to recognize the movement of the wave or the beam that you want to be on, where you can feel the movement of clarification and healing, where you can be the solution yourself by being in balance and on the beam. Again, this is part of the work. If you want to experience things in a new way, you're going to have to start doing things differently. We're talking about changing, not being your same old self, where the whole world has changed and now it's no longer offending you, and you're happy. Just because you put on some spiritual glasses. Same old looker sitting behind the glasses, but oh wow, I can see the world as it is. Well, you know what? You've already got only two eyes, and you're already looking at the kingdom of heaven, and you're already not seeing it. So it isn't the eyes or the glasses, it's the willingness to change and look and see differently. And ultimately be in a new way in the world. And the way will involve involvement with your brothers and sisters. hanging in there with them through all of the struggle of coming to mutual agreement. And I will tell you that if you don't engage in the struggle of hanging in there with your fellow man until you can come to mutual agreement, the dissonance that already exists will increase until negotiations will occur in the middle of a battlefield, and it will really be rugged to negotiate. Now, I'm not forecasting some third world war here or Armageddon. I'm just pointing out a principle. Each time one of you communicates with a brother or a sister and hangs in there in the communication until more harmony and more peace exists between you. Every time you do that, you lessen the conflict in the world. Not just that the two of you are not seeing and being with each other in the old way, but the attitude has lightened the attitude in the world and touches those in the world who are receptive to the increased clarity that you're experiencing, and they will find themselves more easily able to hang in there with and resolve problems with their enemies or their troublesome neighbors or friends or spouses, you see. And so it's more exponential than you might think. Does that clarify things for you?
Yes. No, I think that's outstanding. I have a kind of a follow-up on it then. Obviously, because none of us are awake, and some days I'm far less awake than others. When you put your shoulder against the wheel in a cause, let's say, take example of what Martin Luther King was doing in the 60s. Obviously, some changes had to be made. People went down, they fought, the police were, using hoses on them, they were still marching, and because of that, certain things, because of those conflicts that were happening, certain freedoms, greater freedoms took place for the blacks in the United States, and we're able to move forward in a better way. And that's an old example, but there's certainly hundreds of causes, quote unquote, that we could align ourselves with in the present moment. I guess the question is that, and one of the reasons that I've withdrawn from this participation, really, in a sense, is because a lot of this seems to be driven by anger, upset, kind of trying to get the other person, to agree with the ideas that they have, even if there's something that's wrong or that apparently is not lending toward greater freedom on the other side. Still, our history is strewn with examples of good causes that have ended up with just greater suppression. It hasn't ended up with greater freedom.
Indeed.
And so...
And why are you having trouble being consistent with your clearest sense of what is right for you?
I guess I want to make sure that what I align myself to is, maybe that doesn't even matter, but let's say if I take on, I go and march in Washington for something, freedom of religion or something like that, that I want to make sure that what I'm I'm lending myself to is appropriate in that I'm not just part of the noise, but that I am part of a real solution, and I'm not just creating more conflict, or that I'm doing something that will truly and ultimately bring about a greater freedom or a greater awakening.
And where are you going to get that assurance?
I guess I'm going to have to give it to myself. Or from
You're going to
guidance.
have to allow it to be given to yourself. You're going to have to allow yourself to receive it. You're going to have to be willing to allow confirmation of its appropriateness to be presented to you from within. And then you're going to have to look at it and see whether you feel it in your heart. And if you don't feel it in your heart, ask more questions. Don't abandon it. And get the further clarity that's needed so that you may, with your whole heart, put yourself behind the steps you're about to take willingly. Even your willingness to be part of a cause may not cause you to become involved in a cause. Because it's not time for you to be playing that part in the symphony. By all means, don't join a cause for the sake of joining a cause.
I'm clear about that.
Okay.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. Hands. In the back, yes. You.
Thank you. I kind of have two questions, but if the first one might answer the answer to the first one might answer the second one. My first question is, some while ago I got very frustrated trying to meditate and hear my guidance. And I got so angry, I finally just took all of this, whatever it is you want to call it, and put it on a shelf and turned my back on it and walked away. And then I got an invitation to come to a gathering, and I thought, well, okay, I'll go. And I found that I hadn't not been doing anything at all. There were things going on with me that I wasn't consciously aware of, but I never did stop awakening. Little steps. And now I think it's time to try again, but I don't want to do it the way I did it before and get frustrated and angry and stop. So I want to do it the right way this time, and I wanted to know if you have some advice to give me how to proceed